Okay, so we're doing now our shir on Chanukah, and the way I want to do this is, um, interesting. Hold on, let me just. Everyone should just mute, okay, so that there's no background noise. If you can unmute if you want to ask a question. So basically, the way I want to do this shir is, first I want to present what the Rizal says about Chanukah, where really the truth is that the Rizal usually by mostly Yom Tovim, he gives us a long, long arichas of the story that's happening behind the Yom Tov. Because of course, we know that even though the Yom Tovim on a simple level just represent, the way that certain events that happen in Jewish history, so to speak, that were important. That's on the simple level. But the Rizal explains that really there's a special there's a special thing that's happening in Shemayim, every one of the Yom Tovim. Just like with every mitzvah that we do, and everything has, it's ma'or different things in the higher oilamas. So the Yom Tovim are the same. Usually the Rizal gives us a long, long arichas explanation in Shar Kavunas for every Yom Tov. Chanukah, he only gives us 3 points in Shar Kavunas and 1 point in Pri Eitz Chaim. And we're going to go through those points. So those don't have that much of a background in Pneumis Torah, I'm going to try to explain the points as best as possible. The second part of the shir is where everything really comes together, because the second part of this year is where I'm going to explain how all of these concepts the Rizal tells us that seem to be separate ideas are actually all the same. And in chassidus, we're going to see how chassidus puts it all together for avoida. And then the last part of the show, what I want to do is I want to show the kavunas inside. And I didn't send out the actual PDF with the kavunas, so I'm going to put it on the screen when we do that part. But then I'm going to send it out as an email. So the people that want to be mechavan the kavunas, and they're not that complicated compared to any other kavunas of any other Yom Tovim or anything else for that matter. So I will go through them at the end. So that's basically the way I want to do the structure. So first of all, the Rizal tells us, first of all, there's this idea that you can divide the spheres of Zer Anpin, right, where there's a chagas and a nehi. You can divide each of those into a sub chagas and nehi of chagas and a chagas and nehi of nehi, which the Rizal calls those parts of hayomim and parts of hazmanim. So if you take that chagas, this chesed gvir tiferes of Zah, and you divide that up into chesed gvir tiferes neitz chod yisoid, that's going to be the 6 days of the week, and that's called parts of hayomim. So every single day of the week, the tefillahs that we do and the tefillin and all the mitzvahs that we do on those days, they're masak in a certain part of that chagas of Zah. Then the nehi of Zah is also divided into 6, into chagas nehi, and that's called parts of ha-zmanim, and that's all the yomim tovim. If that was confusing, I'm going to put it up on the whiteboard just so that people can see it, right? I know that one person's calling in from a phone, so I'll try to describe it as we see it, and it's much easier if you can see a picture of it. Okay, so I started already. So here you can see the top 3 boxes represent the chagas of Zah, so chesed on the right side, gvir on the left side, and tiferes in the middle. And then the bottom 3 boxes are the nehi, the neitzach hod yisoid of Zah. So neitzach on the right side, hod on the left side, and yisoid in the middle. You then can divide those into 6. So you're going to have a chagas nehi in chagas, and a chagas nehi in nehi. So the chagas and nehi of chagas, like I mentioned, those are the days of the week. So you have chesed is Sunday. I'm just going to use the Goyish names because just for reference, right? The Gvira is Monday. Then the Tiferes is Tuesday. The Netzach is Wednesday. And the Hoid of the Chagas is Thursday. And the Yisoid of that Chagas is Friday. And then, of course, Shabbos is what brings them all together. So that's what we're doing during the weekdays. Then the Yom Tovim are going to be connected to Chagas and Nehi of Nehi. And that's called parts of Azmanim. So you have Pesach is Chesed. And we have this, the reason for this is because we say that Avram instituted the Yom Tov of Pesach, right? So that's associated with the sphere of Chesed. And then you have the Yomim Neroim are Gvira, which I think it's self-explanatory, right? They're days of Din. And then you have that the Tiferes there is Yom Tov Shavuos. And the reason is because Shavuos is Kabul Torah. The Torah is associated with Tiferes. Purim is connected to Netzach. So Purim is down here. And Chanukah, and this is going to be what's significant to our Shir, is Chanukah is Hoyt. And then Yesoid, the result tells us, is what's it called? Is Tu B'Shvat and Tu B'Av is Yesoid. So I'm just admitting 2 more people to the share. Okay. Okay. Oh, and another person just joined. Okay. So that's basically the setup of the Yom Tovim. So the main point over.
Where's Sukkot?
Yeah. Sorry.
Where is Sukkot?
Sukkot is together with the Yom Neruim. It's in Gvira. So Chanukah basically comes out. Chanukah's Hoyt. And we see this in all the chassidus from all the chassidus from talk about this idea that Chanukah is Hoyd, and we're going to understand what that means. But we're going to get there. For first, let's just take that for a fact that Chanukah is working on that Hoyd. Then the result tells us a different thing, and this other thing has to do with the fact that we have mitzvahs deraisa, mitzvahs derabunan. Mitzvahs deraisa are working on Zah, and mitzvahs derabunan are working on Nik, which is Malchus. Right now, I know that seems to be a contradiction of what we just said. We just said that Chanukah is Hoyd of Zah, right? But we're going to get to that. But also, the mitzvahs derabunan are taken in Nik, and we know that Zah, the big Zah, can be divided. For those who are in the Eitz Chaim Shir, we just saw this just now, recently, that the big Zah can be divided into Zoin Hagadolim. So there's like a Zah and a Nik in the Zah, a Zocher and Nekaiva there, and then the Nik itself, you have Yaakov and Ruchel, which are the Zocher and the Kaiva over there. Usually in the weekdays what we have, which makes sense, that since that Nik is at the bottom, she's standing up until the Chuzah of Zah from the bottom, right? So then it comes out that she's standing essentially on the Nihi of Zah. And usually the way we say is Yaakov, the male aspect is on the right side, so that would be like on the Netzach of Zah. And the other parts of over there, the Ruchel, the female aspect of Nik, is standing on the Hoyd of Zah. So that's how it is during the weekday. That's how it is all the time. The result tells us over here a totally unusual concept. On a Chanukah, they're both in Hoyd. So everything's on the female side, on the Nikariva side. Okay, that's the second thing the result tells us. And we have to understand what that means, because this is something that's totally never done. You never talk about things this way, that even the Zocher is in the side of the Nikaiva. So that's the second point from the result. And then the third point that the result tells us in Shar Kavunas is he tells us about this idea of Ner, the Ner Chanukah. So Ner is going to be a gematria of the 3 zivigim that we talk about all the time. We have this idea of the zivig on the top level, on the Chabad level, is called nishikin. It's called kissing, right? Because that's a zivig on the level of the head. And then you have on the level of the, level of the chest, you have the embracing, the chibik, which is kneged the chagas. And then down at the bottom, you have the zivig yisoidus, the zivig, which is actually the true zivig between the 2 yisoidus of the zucher and nekaiva. That's on the level of the nehi. And each of those is associated with 2 shaimas. You have that the zivig on the level of the shikin is called havaya with ekya, havaya being the male aspect and ekya being the female aspect, and those fused together. Then you have on the level of the chibik of the hugging is havaya with elikim. And those 2, havaya is the zucher and lekim's the nekaiva. That's the connection level of the chibik of the hugging. And then level of the nehi, you have havaya and adna, which is havaya is the zucher and adna is the nekaiva. All those shaimas together, those 6 shaimas, havaya, ekya, havaya, lekim, havaya, adna, together is gematria ner. So usually, in order to be able to have a zivig on all those three levels, you have to have that the female parts of Nick is standing head to head with Zah, so that they can fit in parallel on these three levels. The result tells us that the Nes Chanukah, the miracle of Chanukah, and just first as an introduction, a Nes, a miracle, means something that's supernatural, that goes beyond the laws of nature. The reason I'll explain this is that the reason why we have on Purim and on Chanukah the idea of a Nes, of something that's miraculous, is because even in Atzilus there could be miracles. Because Atzilus has its structure and has its order and has its rules. And then those rules sometimes are broken, and that's called a Nes, that's called a miracle. So on Chanukah, the idea is that even though the Nik, the parts of Nik, is very, very low on Chanukah, and we're going to explain in a second why, but even though that parts of Nik is very low, she still somehow gets all three of these Zavigim with Zah. The Havaya Eke, Havaya Elikim, Havaya Adne. Nik gets all of those together, even though she's not ready for them. It's like she's still bekatness. It's almost like saying that little baby, the little baby girl, had a zivig and became a beres and had a child, which is something that's like totally beyond nature. Those are three things that the result tells us in Shar Kavunas. And then he adds on in Pri Eitz Chaim one more Nikida that somehow the Yidgil with the Sarachamim coming over here. Because the result tells us over there, the reason why the first bracha, L'hadlik ner Chanukah, has 13 words within it. And again, this is going to be for those that daven Nesach Ashkenaz and they say L'hadlik ner shel Chanukah, then it doesn't work. Then it's 14 words. But the result says to say L'hadlik ner Chanukah. Then you have 13 words there. That's Kneged Yidgil Sarachamim. And over there, he also tells us that every single night of Chanukah, one of the Midas Sarachamim comes in, up until the 8th night, right? Which the 8th night is Kneged Noitzer Chesed. And we're going to see it at the end. We're going to see it on a chart, so we're going to see exactly how they correspond. But the 8th night is going to be Noitzer Chesed, which we know that that's a very significant one of the Yidgul Midas Sarachamim, right? Because that's they say that there's a Mazel Elyon and a Mazel Tachte. The Mazel Elyon is the 8th one, Noitzer Chesed, which is connected the front part of where the beard. Mostly the Mizrachim are connected different parts of the beard of Arich, of Keser. So again, we're throwing Keser in over here. So I know that there's a lot of different things here that we're going to have to sort of work out. But the beard of Arich, the 8th tikkun over there, connected Noitzer Chesed, is the front of the long part of the beard that's coming down. Most of the other ones are just places on the face, which are not as prominent, right? But the long part of the beard coming down, the front part is Noitzer Chesed, and that's the 8th night of Chanukah. And that 8th night of Chanukah contains all the rest of the Yidgil Midas Sarachamim. So that's what the result tells us about Chanukah. So what do we do with all of this, right? Some of this might have been over some people's heads, and even the people that are familiar with Eitz Chaim are familiar with the result. It seems to be different ideas that don't seem to have any connection to each other. In the Chassidus Forum, we find actually there is a very deep connection between all of these things. And part of it is going to have to do with the fact that we know that Chanukah is a weekday Yom Tov, right? It's different than other Yom Tovim, except Purim. Purim is also like that because Purim also you're allowed to do Malacha. But even on Purim, there's an idea that it's a Yom Tov that's different, right? We have all these different special mitzvahs that we do throughout the day, right? And each of them accomplishes a certain tikkun. We wear big day Shabbos on Purim, right? Like on all Yom Tovim. Chanukah, most people, there are some people that have the minhag to put on a shtaramel by lighting Chanukah, by lighting the menorah, but most Eden, everything's totally weekday. It's so weekday that even the schools, like the yeshivas and the chadurim have school. It's totally like a regular weekday, except there's one special thing that we like Chanukah left, right? There's not even a mitzvah of a sida. Chassidus made a sida, it says in Shulchan Aruch that if you have a sida and you sing a niggin, then it's considered Yom Tov sida. But it's very weekday, right? So to go deeper with this, right? The weekdays are present, and it's in the winter, which the winter is a zman where the nights are long. We know that the night is a bechina of din. The klippas have a attachment at night, right? and then specifically Chanukah night is when we light the menorah, right? So we see that there's an idea of doing it in this time of darkness. The menorah is lit. It says it's supposed to be lamatim asura, below 10 tfuchim is where you're supposed to light the menorah. And then the Gemara tells the Shechina doesn't come down below 10 tfuchim. Below 10 tfuchim is the mukam haklippus, and that's where we're lighting the menorah, right? Lighting the menorah, the minig, originally it was instituted to light it by the doorway, right? Some people have minig to light it by the window for the prasima nissa, right? So that it's so that that the nest is mefers and people can see it, but Alpi Kabbalah, the way the Rizal discussed it, he talks about the doorway. It's on the opposite side of the mezuzah. So you're putting it on the place where there is no mezuzah. Again, an implication of putting it in a place that's not holy. Then the Rizal also tells us there's many other ideas that sort of come together with this idea. You have the idea that the Chanukah is supposed to be a pirsum. It's supposed to be you're announcing the nest to those that are bechitz, those that are outside, right? Even though many chassidim today light by a certain doorway inside the house, but originally the meaning wasn't, and it's just they still do it like this, by the doorway to the house, so that it can be seen outside. So the idea of showing it outside, we know that outside, chitz, right, is the mukam hachitzainim, the mukam of the klippus. So it's almost like we're shining a light into the place of the klippus, right? The very idea of the name Chanukah, right, comes from the expression of chinuch, right, which on a simple level just refers to the idea that it's the chinuch, it's like the dedication, so to speak, rededication of the Beit Hamikdash after the Yevunim took over. But like I heard today, Bashal Shidus Reb Shia was talking about this, and he mentioned that there's this idea that it's that we have chanoich lenar lepidarkoi, right? We have in Mishlei Shlomo Melech says, teach the child according to his way. So again, it's the idea of teaching the child, teaching this katness, this level of smallness, right? Again, referring to a dark place. And there's so many different things that fit into this. The very idea of that the miracle of Chanukah was essentially, if you think about it, the Beit Hamikdash was devastated, right? And all they found was one little pure container of oil. That's all they found. They found this little tiny thing in this devastation, this destruction, this terrible thing that happened when the Yevunim attacked the Beit Hamikdash and defiled the Beit Hamikdash. So again, it's like looking for that one little good thing in that great darkness. This is going to be right. So someone said that the chinuch could also be talking about like an interconnection to Hashem. Yeah, that's true. We're going to see how all this fits together. So the idea when the Rizal tells us that the nik is in katnus, meaning that it's in the weekdays, it's in a time where there is no, you don't have that elevation of the nik like we have on Shabbos or Yom Tov, right? Where we have that Malchus raises herself up, the nik raises herself up to a level where she's able to be mezavik with Zah, right? But on Chanukah, it's happening when she's still very, very small, when there's really not, it's not even shaykh zivik. But that idea of lighting the Ner Chanukah in the place of the klippus, in the place of katnus, in that place of darkness, and is the idea of bringing that tremendous or that ner, that tremendous power of zivik down to a very, very small place. Which is why the Rizal tells us that that's why we light Ner Chanukah on Erev Shabbos, right? We light the Ner Chanukah first before we light the Ner Shabbos. Because once we light the Ner Shabbos, we're starting this idea of the nik being elevated on Shabbos, where she goes from level to level to level to level, right? Then she's already growing. Then you can't after that light Ner Chanukah, because after that, once she's already on a high level, the whole Ner Chanukah that doesn't mean anything anymore, because the whole point is that we're bringing the or down to her when she's very, very low. There's a story with one of the chassidus Rebbes. I don't remember which one. Maybe Mendel Vitebska, but I don't remember who it was. But there's a story of one of the chassidus Rebbes. He was lighting Ner Chanukah, and before he lit Ner Chanukah, he called over one of the chassidim, whose wife was very short. and he called over this chassid, and he asked the chassid, when you want to speak to your wife, does she have to stand up on her tippy toes to speak to you, or do you bend down to speak to her? So he said, I bend down to speak to her. So the Rebbe said, oh, sure, very good. And he made the Baruch Adlik Ner Chanukah. All the people were confused, right? But you can understand it, right? Because the idea is, again, bring ourselves down, bring that ore down to a very low place. Oh, yeah, very good. So someone said there was a Dovid Tolner, right? So now that you mentioned it, right? That's who it was, right? Very good, shkoyach. So basically, so these are all extremely interesting ideas, right? It's all about bringing the light into the darkness, lighting up the darkness, and seeing the light in the darkness. What does that have to do with Yid the Sarachamim? So, on a simple level, we have this idea that that we know that on the level of Zah, Anpin, right? That's a level of din. In Lifi Erech of compared to Keser, compared to Arech. On the level of Anpin Kiviyuchel is the noise in the Torah. Hashem, when Hashem gave the Torah, when the Ein Sof manifested that ore of the Torah, it manifested through Anpin. The whole idea of Vaidaber Hashem al Moshe, the reason it tells us that's always Anpin Kiviyuchel is Hashem is Chalila. We shouldn't think. No one should make a mistake and think that Anpin is some kind of independent koyach. It's obviously coming from the Ein Sof, but that's the one that's manifesting the Torah. And so therefore, on that level of Anpin, there's rules and there's things that we have to do and things that we're not allowed to do. On the level of Anpin, there's char and there's oynish. If you're a tzaddik, if you're worthy, then you get schar. And if chas v'shalom person is not a tzaddik, then you get some oynish. But higher than that, it's pure rachamim. Side point, but are connected. That the result tells us on Purim that usually the entire year we don't have to give tzedakah to everyone, right? We give tzedakah to a person who we think is worthy. We ask to see his tzedel from the vat, right, to make sure that he's actually worthy of getting tzedakah. On Purim, kol ha'poish yad noisem, we give to everybody, and the reason is because usually the gaba tzedakah is zah, right, and zah determines who's worthy and who's not worthy. But higher than that, which on Purim there's an order that comes from Abba, it's not relevant to what we're learning now, but it's coming from a higher place. So over there, Abba's the nice in tzedakah. So over there, everybody gets, right? And higher than that is the level of Arich, which is Keser, which is this idea of this dikna of Yidgul Sarachamim, where that's an idea of that everybody gets because over there it's pure Rachamim, right? It's like if you want to use like an analogy to understand this a little bit better. So you have like a little kid, right? His parents aren't going to give him candy because his parents know that the candy is going to make him hyper. You might give him candy once in a while, right? But when he goes to the grandparents are just like, they just give him everything because they're not responsible for his chinuch. This is already a higher level where over there is just this pure ahava and this pure rachamim, right? So that's sort of way to understand it. This level of arich is pure rachamim. And over there, there's a dia fila ainoi ruya fila ainoi kedai, right? That anybody can receive from that level. So someone asked if Oir's Shabbos are different than Chanukah. Yes, it's totally different because on Shabbos there's the idea of aliyah, of elevating malchus, elevating Nick to a higher level, right? Whereas Chanukah is the idea that she's on a totally low level. She's not ruya at all. But this or is coming down, right? So this idea of Arich being this place that from which the Rachamim is constant. There's a constant flow of Rachamim to everybody. Even if he's not worthy of it, right? Is the soy that Hashem was Megala when he was Megala Rachamim to Moshe. He was Megala to Moshe this idea that if there's an emergency, the Klal Yisrael are in a time of tsar, and the Tzaz and the Klal Yisrael aren't worthy of being redeemed according to Zer Anpin, you can have like this sort of like a sort of like a cheat to bypass, right, and speak to the manager, Kaviyuchel, right, go up to a higher level and bring down that Rachamim, even if the Klal Yisrael aren't rui for it. We see this by the Yamsuf, right, and I mentioned this many times in the Shirim. That by the Yamsuf we have this idea, the way the Zohar explains it there, right, is the Zohar explains that by the Yamsuf, the Klal Yisrael were not worthy of being redeemed. because the Yam didn't want to split for them. The Yam said, "Ali of Dovid is Ali of Dovid is the Mitzrim serve idols and the Klal Yisrael serve idols. Why should I split for the Klal Yisrael and then drown the Mitzrim?" The Yam was sort of going with that derech of Zer Anpin, that derech of Rui or Aina Rui, and then the Klal Yisrael were crying out to Hashem, to Havaya, which we know represents Zer Anpin, and Hashem said, "Ma titzak elai, what are you screaming out to me for?" So the way the Zohar Kodesh explains it is Matitzak Alai is Zer Anpin is saying, you can't talk to me about this because I'm Midas Adin Kivyuchel. I can't let you through the Yam because you're not Rui, you're not worthy. Batika Talia Mil, so the Zohar tells us. You have to go up to that level of Arich, that level of Keser. You have to appeal to there, and then the Yam will split. So this idea is one idea of why the Yidgul Sarachma are relevant on Chanukah when we're dealing with low levels and bring Or into very low levels, right? But then there's an even more interesting idea from Reb Nachman in Lekitei Maran. Reb Nachman tells us, so someone asked, so Chanukah carries this energy, right? This grandparent energy, if you want to call it that, right? This energy of Arich, of Keser, that's able to come down even to the lowest place. And the truth is, we're going to see now from Rav Nachman, it's not just that it comes down to the lower place, it actually is there inherently. Because Rav Nachman explains the Ketimran, a very interesting thing. We have this idea of Basur Mamuras Nivra Ho'elam. The world was created with 10 utterances. And those are, of course, are connected to 10 spheres. And those are the 10 times that it says Vayomer Elokim in the first parak of Brashis, except there's one problem. It only says it 9 times, right? So what's the 10th? So Chazal say Brashis Nami Mamerha. The Brashis, the word Brashis is also a mamer. It's also a saying, but it's not because it doesn't say Vayomer Elokim. So Rav Nachman explains that Brashis is a mamer hasusum. It's a concealed mamer. It's a concealed saying. You don't even see Vayomer Elokim over there. Those 10 are connected to 10 spheres. So he says that Mamar Hasusam, that Brashis, which is so concealed, it's a concealed saying, and that's because it's Keser. Those 10 are connected to Sarachamim. Are connected to 10 spheres, right? So in the 10 spheres, Keser is the highest and most concealed of the spheres, the one we have no Hasuga and no concept of whatsoever. So if Nachman asks the question, everything in the universe and in all the universes gets Or from Hashem to be able to exist. Where does the Or come to the Mekoimis Hamitinufim, to the impure places? And Nachman says, and the Butei Avodah Zura, the idolatrous temples, right? Where do they're getting an Or Hashem? They must be, because otherwise it couldn't exist. Where does it come from? And Nachman says it comes from the Mamer Hasusa. It comes from Keser. And what that really means is because that case is such a concealed Or, so it's the only Or that can really come down into and manifest in such a low place. Anything else that's lower, there's too much of a gili of Or, there's too much of a revelation of Or, so if it comes to a very low place, it will destroy that low place with its Or. Right? Only that highest Or is the one that can come down to the lowest places. So Reb Nachman says, when a person is in a very, very low place, and he's in a place which is choshech, which is darkness, they should ask himself, I am Mekoim Kavoidai, where the Rizal tells us that I am Mekoim Kavoidai is also connected Keser. He should ask himself, where's Hashem's glory? And the answer is, even here, right? Even in the lowest place. Nachman says that's the idea. Also, we have Aye Hasei Lo'oila. Where is the sheep for the offering, right? Which was by Yitzchak, by Akadis Yitzchak. He says that's the idea. The sheep, the wool of the sheep is white, represents that dikna of Keser, of Arich, which is an Or that comes down even to the lowest places. And that's why he says when the Merachim were revealed to Moshe, Kavyuchol Chazal say that Hashem can clothe himself in a talus and said the Yidgul Sarachimim. Because that talus, that whiteness, that white wool, represents the idea of the dikna of Arach, which is the highest Or. So really, it's the same thing. Like we said before, we just explained it mechanically. So Anpin is bechina of din, and Keser Arach is Bechinas Arachmim, so therefore that Bechinas Arachmim comes down even to Eine Rui v'Eine Kedai, even the person's not worthy of it, right? But this idea from Rav Nachman explains why that is, right? Because the idea is that an ore that's lower is too much gili of ore to be able to come down to places that's not Rui and not Kedai. But that ore of Keser, of Arich, is an ore that can even come where it's Eine Rui and Eine Kedai, can even come down to places which seem to be places where we don't see the ore. So it comes out from this that the whole idea of Chanukah really, be'emes, is this idea of being being megala that or revealing that or even in those lowest places. But there's a catch. The catch is the Zohar tells us, and this again, the Zohar only mentions Chanukah once, I believe, in Tikinei Zohar, as far as I know. Chazal, as we know, the Tanoim did not speak much about Chanukah. There's no Masechtas Chanukah in Mishnayos, right? The Gemara in Bamei Madlikin, where the Mishnayos deal with Ner Shabbos, has a section on Chanukah. The Tanoim didn't speak about Chanukah. I think some of the reasons that they say for it, the Mefarshim say, is because that was a time where they had to be very careful. They couldn't talk about this idea of this victory over the enemy armies, because the Romans then were in charge, and they didn't want that the Romans should think that they want to make a revolt or whatever it is. So in the Tanakh, I find very little about Chanukah. There's one place in Tikinei Zohar where it talks about Chanukah. It only says one thing, which is also sounds totally mysterious. That when we say Baruch Shem Kvoid Malchus Elolam Vuad after Shema, that is 25 oisias. And those 25 oisias are connected from Aleph Kislev till Chof Hai Kislev, till the first night of Chanukah. That's all the Zohar says, and without an explanation. So, but Rav Nusan in Lekitei Halachos, he goes on this Ma'amar of Rav Nachman that I mentioned, and he explains it in the Hilchos Tzitzis. So over there he's dealing with the Tzitzis, and he talks about this whole idea that I mentioned before about the talus, and that represents the white wool, represents this idea of Keser, of Arich, and he says that Baruch Shem Kvod Malchus Lo'olam Vuad we say quietly, right? And the reason why we say it quietly is because Baruch Shem Kvod Malchus Lo'olam Vuad is this statement that this Kvod Malchus, this Kvod of Hashem's Malchus, this idea of Hashem's or the or that coming down from Hashem, is really present everywhere, even in the Mukama Klippas, and at all times, even when a person has fallen into a place of Klippa, even when a person has fallen into a place of darkness, right? The person thinks, "Oh, I'm distant from Hashem, and I'm not with Hashem." So it was to say, I am a Kohen Kvoida, even in this dark place, is Hashem's, or it must be, because otherwise it couldn't exist. And from seeing the idea that this or is even in this choshech, right? With that, he's able to elevate himself and transform the choshech, or reveal the or that's in the choshech, and from that be able to pick himself, using that energy to pick himself up and out of that dark place. And Nachman says in a different place that this is the idea of where we have and this idea that the place where the Baal Tshuva stands, even the perfect tzaddik can't stand. So Rav Nachman explains it in a very beautiful way. Explains it like this. He says, if a person is a perfect tzaddik, in other words, he's never sinned, that means that person is very strict with himself. He's very militant with himself. Right? Otherwise, he would mess up, he would sin. Such a person that's such a perfectionist, if he would have ever sinned, he would have never gotten out of it, because he would have been totally devastated by the fact that he messed up, because he's a perfectionist. So, so a lot of times the perfectionist, he messes up, and he has yish, he gives up on everything, because he says, "Oh, I'm such a piece of garbage, look what I just did," and he just drops everything, right? Or even if he doesn't drop everything, but he drops a lot of things, because he's just so devastated. He would never be able to crawl back out of that place where he fell. The Baal Tshuva is someone who's able to see that he's good and that he's connected to Hashem, even when he fell into a bad place. And that is Gifoy, that itself is that koyach that's able to pick him back up out of there. But going back to Rav Nussin says that that's why we say Baruch Shem Kvod Melchis Leilam Vued quietly, is because this is a thing that can't be spoken, right? Loudly. And the reason is because a person could chas v'shalom use this for a teretz, right? A person could say, oh, great, wherever I am, no matter what's going on, everything's great because there's Or Hashem here. And it's the highest Or. It's that Or from Arich, from Keser that's here. So a person might use that as a teretz not to want to grow and not to want to rise up from the place where he is. Just stay where he is because it's also fine, because it's also Or Hashem. And that's what the Misnagdim were afraid of about the Chassidim. One of the things they were afraid of is because the Chassidim were so full of Ahavas Hashem that they're afraid that they're going to say that, whatever happens is good and everything's fine. So a person has to sort of take these two concepts together. On the one hand, he has to say that wherever I am and whatever situation I'm in, I'm still connected to Hashem. But at the same time, a person needs to always want to grow, because the whole reason why we're here is to grow, right? The whole idea of Nahama de Kasifa, the whole idea of that Hashem gives us schar and oinish because of this idea of this bread of shame, this Nahama de Kasifa. If we would get everything for free, then we wouldn't feel like we're accomplishing anything. We're built. Literally, human beings are built to accomplish and to want to accomplish, right? Everybody wants to accomplish. Even people that aren't spiritual, they want to accomplish. They want to be successful in their business. Or, a sports player wants to win the game, right? Or whatever it is, right? Human beings are designed to want to accomplish and to feel good when we accomplish, right? And because of that, the idea is that a person has to be able to see the Or, even in the Choshech, and even in that place of darkness, and he has to want to grow and rise and get to a place of more revealed Or, right? So the two concepts go together. That's the way the Rizal explains in Ner Chanukah and the Ner Shabbos, right? The Ner Chanukah is the idea of down in the Choshech and revealing that there's a light also in the Choshech, but at the same time, then there's this idea of Shabbos, right, of the going up and of the growing, right? So those two ideas sort of go together. That's why we have by Chanukah this idea that we're not supposed to be mishtamish. We're not supposed to use the light of the menorah. Ela l'roisam bilvat, right? Right? We don't have rishus to use them. Ela l'roisam bilvat, only to see them. Because the idea is that to see the Or in the Choshech, right? Okay, so we see it, you recognize it, right? You recognize that it's there. That's all there is to do with it, right? You can't go into a Bais Avodah Zura and start elevating it, right? You recognize that there's Or there, right? But all you can do is recognize it. You can't. The avodah for the Yid is to rise up to a higher place, and in that higher place appeared to be what's it called? Is to be able to rise up to a higher place. Someone just chatted, right? I made a mistake, right? Because Baruch Hashem has 24 oisias and Shema Yisrael is 25, right? So basically, the way that what the Zohar says is that Baruch Hashem has 24 oisias, and those are the oisias, the days up until Chanukah, right? And then Chanukah itself is after that, is number 25, right? So Baruch Hashem is 24, not 25. Okay, so that was a cheshbon mistake. Okay, so shkoyach for that. Okay, so basically that's this idea of the Ner Chanukah, and this is going to explain. So someone asked, is this relevant with to Tzimtzum K'pshita and Tzimtzum Shaloi K'pshita? Right, because that was one of the big machloikas in between the Misnagdim and between the Chassidim, right? So the truth is this is going to be deep, right? Okay, here we go. It's Gishmak though. The idea, basically, this idea of the Tzimtzum was literal or not literal, right? The result tells us that first the Or Ein Sof filled all of existence, and then the way the result explains is the Ein Sof emptied itself out of a certain spherical, hyperspherical, because it's more than 3-dimensional, it's infinite dimensional space, right? And that in that empty space, he then created the Oilamus. So the question was if that's literal or not. So the Misnagdim said it's literal. The Rizal says it. The Rizal says it, right? Even though Reb Chaim Volozhin himself, Nefesh Chaim, might have perhaps held differently, but the Gru was very adamant that it's literal. And there's others that it's not just the Machlekes of Chassidim and Misnagdim, because this is something that was going on, was discussed before also. The Mishnah's Chassidim and other previous Mikabulim also disagreed about this. But essentially the Guru said it's Tzimtzum Kipshita, it's literally empty. And the Chassidim said, no, it can't be. How can there be that the Ein Sof is limited and Ein Sof is not in a certain place? It must be, it's not literal. It must be that the Ein Sof is concealed in that place, right? And it's connected to this idea that of what the Misnagdim were afraid of. They were afraid that the Chassidim were going to say that since it's not literal, Hashem's in every place, therefore Hashem is even in the darkness. So therefore, no matter what happens, it's good, and we don't have to be makbid on Zman Tefillah, and we don't have to be makbid on this halach, and that was the fear. But the truth is that first of all, the Tzimtzum Shaloi Kipshita is really this idea that we're talking about, this idea that there's Or even in the Choshech, and Hashem is everywhere, even in the darkest places and the most challenging times, right? Hashem is still there. But even the Tzimtzum Kipshita, according to the Leishim, the way the Leishim explains it, is really saying the same thing. Because Leishim says, because really it's a very good question. How can the people that learn Tzimtzum Kipshita learn that the Tzimtzum is literal and the empty space is literally empty? How can they possibly answer that idea that Hashem is not somewhere, that Hashem is, Hashem is everywhere. He can't be limited by not being somewhere. The way the Leishim understands it is the Tzimtzum Kipshita is saying that the emptiness is not emptiness. It's a revelation of the koyach of the Ein Sof to be not. So it's a hemshech of the Ein Sof itself too. So that, because think about it, what does it mean, a concept of darkness? What does it mean, a concept of emptiness? The Ein Sof is filling all of existence. The Ein Sof had to create such a concept of ayin, of nothingness. And that concept of ayin, of nothingness, is itself a koyach of the Ein Sof's ability to be ayin. So it's also the Ein Sof. So according to the Leishman, comes out, he doesn't say it beferish because he says Tzimtzum Kipshita, and those that say Shaloi Kipshita don't know what they're talking about. But I think be'emes, it's literally they're saying the exact same thing. They're saying that the Ein Sof is there in that darkness too, right? Except that it's just a semantics thing, right? One of them is saying you can't take it literally because the Ein Sof has to be there. Another one's saying, yeah, no, the Ein Sof, it's literally empty, but that itself is a koyach of the Ein Sof to be empty, right? So it comes out that according to both of them, really be'emes, that darkness is also a gili of elikus, and that emptiness, right? Right, and that's why Ein is, someone chatted, that's why Ein is a higher or, because it's the greater chiddush, right? Because be'emes, it's like the philosophers have this question, or the anti-religious philosophers have this question. They're going to ask you this, right? You have to know to answer them, right? They're going to ask you, whoa, can God create a rock that's too heavy for him to lift, right? So what they're trying to say is they want to get you stuck, because if you say yes, because he can do anything, well, then he can't pick up the rock. So you see he can't do anything. If you say no, then you're limiting him, right? But the emes is that the greatest koyach that the Ein Sof can do is to make itself the opposite of its own essence, right? Because the Ein Sof's essence is to be. So if the Ein Sof decides, I'm going to create a concept of my non-being, of ayin, right? So that is really the greatest gili, the greatest revelation of that koyach of the Ein Sof. So it comes out, this is all the same idea that we've been talking about the whole time, that the greatest or is in the greatest choshech. And that's basically the way the chassidus, Kabbalah, the way we can understand all these ideas that we talked about before. It's the idea of the Yidgulus Arachamim, which you mentioned, and it's the idea of that the result tells us that Malchus on Chanukah is really at the very bottom, and she's getting miraculously this tremendous or that's coming from above, right? But then also we have to get into the idea of hoit. So the word hoid or haidua has many different connotations in Hebrew, because it could mean many different things. But there's a cipher or chudash on Chanukah, chassidus cipher, that the whole cipher is on Chanukah, and it's basically just building up this idea. That the idea of hoid or haidua is the idea of, when you say a person's moida, a person admits, right? That means he admits to something. Right, you say that he was moida that he did whatever, right? He admitted that he did it. The idea of this hoid, of this being moida, of admitting, is the idea of admitting this idea that the Ein Sof is even in the greatest darkness, right? And that's why Chanukah is associated with the hoid. And that's also why you have this interesting thing that the result tells us that both Yaakov and Ruchel are both in the hoid of Zah on Chanukah. Which means essentially that you're saying that even the Zohar, even the Mashpia, even the Or is coming down to the place of the Nekaiva, coming down to the place of darkness. Again, this idea of the Or, of the Mashpia, of the Zohar, of the light, coming down to the darkness, coming down to that place. And that's basically, in a nutshell, right, the Avodah of Chanukah. Also, you have this idea that Nekaiva is the idea of din, right? So then the idea of everything being in hoid is the idea of that even in the din, even in the choshech, even in the darkness, in the winter nights, right, that the or is even there. And then someone just chatted that by the Tefillah of Chanukah we say lohoidis lahalo, right? That's also this idea, right? Even though lohoidis in that context usually we say it means to praise, but at the same time it's to admit to this idea that the or is even in the choshech, right? Which is why Chanukah is connected to Baruch Shem Kvod Malchis Leilam Vuad. So now I just want to finish off by showing you what this looks like. There's a siddur. I'm going to send the PDF later on from Nissim Peretz. The reason why it's good is because every brucha has kavunas from the Rishash called Medbaya brucha, which is standard by every brucha, and that's something we've never learned yet by the Shirim. So this siddur from Nissim Peretz doesn't do that. It just brings just the Chanukah kavunas, and we're going to see how all these ideas sort of come in within the bruchas themselves. So I'm going to put it up on the screen, and I'm going to explain it also for the people that are calling in, right? So that no one feels like, it's obviously it's a little bit less that you can't actually see it, but at least you'll have a little bit of an idea of what's going on. So one of the things that he does here, I'm skipping some of the kavunas before about the shaman, the oil. There's kavunas by the oil, and there's kavunas by making the psilas, making the wicks. There's an avodah by chasidim and by mekabulim to make the wicks themselves, because when you're making the wicks, you're putting more of your energy, so to speak, into it. But here's by the brucha. So first he tells you, basically the idea is, first he tells you what we mentioned before, that one of the Yidgul Sarachamim comes in every single night. So the first night is Hashem. By the way, for those that haven't learned Eitz Chaim, Hashem is not counted among the Yidgul Mizrachim themselves. The Yidgul Mizrachim themselves are the dikna, the beard itself. Then the Hashem before, the Rizal says in one place it's the pious, the Hashem. Other place the Rizal says it's the cheeks. Okay, I don't know how to answer it, but anyway, but it's not part of the Yidgul Mizrachim. Those start from Kyle. So first night is Kyle, Rachim, V'chanan, Erech, Apayim, Rav Chesed, Ve'emes. Then the 8th night of Chanukah, Zois Chanukah, is so special because it's not just Noitze Chesed, right? And over here he just has the zivik. For those that were in the Eitz Chaim, I'm sure you'll know this, that in Noitze Chesed there's a special zivik that occurs between Noitze Chesed and Nakai, the front of the beard and the back of the beard. But the 8th night contains Noitze Chesed plus all the rest of Yidgul Musarachim, and all those come in on the other nights of Chanukah. So in the brucha itself, I don't think we'll have time to go into these Nikiddas, but basically the idea is they have in mind different Nikiddas with Havaya each night. And the first bracha is going to go according to Bais Hillel, and the second bracha according to Bais Shammai. Bais Hillel, as we know, the Gemara says, Bais Hillel says Moisav v'hoylech, that you start the first night, you light one light, and the second night you light two, and it goes up to 8. Bais Shammai says it's the opposite. You go from 8 and you count down to 1. You could really say that the Bais Shammai is saying that if the idea is to reveal the Or and the Choshech, then it makes sense to sort of start with the most light and show that even the smaller light is still, even until you get the total Choshech, right? It is still Or. But anyways, but the way that the Rizal presents it is in the first bracha you're mechavan upwards. So the Nikiddas are associated with the different spheres. Right? It's always what's it called? A melipim around what's it called? On the highs, because that's hoit. Okay, so this is for those that know which series correspond to which nikidus. It starts from chesed and it goes down to malchus. And the second bracha is going to go the other way. It's going to go from bottom up. Okay, but that's a side kavuna. But let's see the kavunas that are associated with what we're talking about. So he has over here regel, because we know the Chanukah we have this idea of acha tichla regel min hashik, right? That you have to light the Chanukah menorah before the regel, before the foot leaves the shik. So, by the way, the Rizal has in this the idea that you have to be very careful to chap the zman, because he says acha tichla regel min hashik is this or only comes down for a very short period of time, and many mekabulim actually light like the way that the minig is in Lita, and I think by most of the Sfardim to light after Shkia, but before Rabbani Tam's man, before Mamish night time. It's pushing mashman the result that way, but some are noig the other way too. By the Chassidim, a lot more noig to light at Rabbani Tam's man. In any case, from whenever the minig is to light, you shouldn't schlep it out and light like 2 hours later, unless you have an oinus. You're busy, you're at whatever it is, you're at work, you're on a flight, whatever, and it's different. But you should try to do it as early as possible to get this or of regel. And regel, which means a foot, is interesting enough. The gematria of the two highest miliyim, right? We're doing Havaya Ekya because this is the first bracha. Remember, we mentioned that this idea of ner is this idea of the zivig Havaya Ekya, Havaya Lekim, Havaya Adna, Nishik, Chibik, and zivig Yisoidis, right? So the first bracha is going to be connected that Nishik is going to be it's going to be Havaya Ekya, but we're using the biggest miliyim. We're using the mili ab of Havaya, are using the mili kisa of Ekya, which is both mili with yids. That's the highest level. Those two together is gematria regel. So again, the same idea. The highest or, but the gematria means foot. It means the lowest thing. Again, the same idea of that the highest or is being megala, is being revealed in the lowest place. Then he adds here a different kavuna. I'm not sure exactly what to make of this kavuna, because the Rizal doesn't really explain the details of it. But he also says that you can be mechavan that sag with kasa, which is the second mili of Havaya, again with that highest mili of Ekya, is gematria 2 times Yaboik, which Yaboik is Havaya Likim. I'm not sure exactly what to make of that one. But the idea is that here you have this idea of the Zivik Havaya Ekya, which is in the Chabad Dazah. This is level of Neshikim, right? This is this highest level. And it's going down to Nik, which is represented by Shemban. Okay? So that's in the first bracha. By the way, notice how by every single word of the bracha, he's also showing that one of the Yidgil Misarachamim is connected to the words of that bracha, because we have this idea, the Yidgil Misarachamim, there's 13 words in the first bracha, and they're connected to the Yidgil Misarachamim. Okay? So then, Melech Olam, this is a kavanah from the Rashash. Every single brucha, whenever you make Melech Olam, and every brucha, your mechavan dal misas bez, your mechavan here, and the shema goes up, even though it's not actually going up, but the kavanah is like a ma'en of your neshama going up and picking up all the netzitzes that are associated with that mitzvah that you're doing. So that's what he has over here. The 4 misas bezdin, and they correspond to different things. This is a side point. Here by Lahadlik, right, he tells us this idea that Lahadlik is is your mechaven to take an or from ima, which is represented by eke being spelled out by Rabia, going into za, and that's this. A side comment. I want to focus on the ones that are mostly relevant. The this whole thing together of Shema together with these ekes in the middle comes out to gematria nachal, which is lahadlik ner Chanukah. Okay, and then it happens to also be Shemban plus the oisius of regular Havaya, Ban, and Mili de Mili of Ban. Together is gematria also nachal, which is I think just Ban by itself is no, I guess all these together. Okay, side point. When you say lahadlik, you have in mind that lahadlik is 3 milim of Havaya, of Ab, Sag, and Ma. Those are going to be connected again, these three levels of Nishikin, Chibik, and Zivik, which is going down to the Nik, which is the Shemban, which is at the lowest place. That's a Hadlik. Now by Ner, you're having all three of these Zivigim, the Nishikin and the Chibik and the Zivik, because like I said, the Ner adds up to Havaya Eke, Havaya Likim, and Havaya Adna together. And by Chanukah, he has a different idea over here of Ashbu going from Ima to Nik. I want to focus on the Ikka ones. Notice how he says here, Va'atu Yaschel Hadlik, the minig by the Mekabulim was to light, believe it or not, the menorah after the first brucha, not after the second brucha. Because the idea is, as soon as you just make that brucha, you want to bring that ner down. Al Pi Halucha, it's questionable. There's ways that they answer it up, how it's okay Al Pi Halucha. And it's not the minig oilam, but the Mekabulim did it that way. And so you're mechavan this idea of regel again is gematria of Havaya of Ab together with Eke of Ksa, right? The highest Havaya of the highest Eke, again, like we talked about before. And that's going down to all the lower worlds to Biyah, which is called the Shik, right? It's called the marketplace. It's a lower level. This regel, this or is coming down. Then the second brucha, the main point in the second brucha is again, you have these Havayas, this time going from bottom and moving upwards each night, right? Like I mentioned, because it's like the Bez Shammai, it's like going the other way. And Jemechavan over here, Havaya Elokim, which is the second Zivik, it's the Chibik, right? And then in the third brucha, you're going to be Mechavan Havaya with Adna, which is the Zivik Yisoidus, right? But since you only make that third brucha the first night, so he says from the second night and on, you have that also in mind in the second brucha. And again, we're using the different milium of Havaya to represent the different levels, because we use that mili of Ab in the first brucha because that's the what's it called, the Nashik, and that's the highest level. And then in the second brucha, you're mechavan Shem Sag, which is the second mili of Havaya. That's going to get the Chibik, and the third brucha, or from the second night on, the second brucha, you're mechavan Ma, which is the what's it called, the third level. That's Zivig Yisoidus. And it's focusing on the main kavunas, and again over here you have this idea of, we learned this in Eitz Chaim, the idea of Shin Ayin Nehoiris, these lights that are coming from the cheeks of Arich, and they're traveling down, and they're shining down to the lowest places. So you're mechaven that She'usu Nisim, the word She'usu is Shin Ayin, Shin Hai, right? So you're mechaven that this Shin Ayin, which is these oirs coming from the highest place, right? Really, he says over here, Mebina Da'ak, which is even higher than Arich, but it manifests through Arich. That's why he says over here that it travels down from Ak, it manifests in Arich. But Bekitzer, that's the Shin Ayin of She'usu, is these tremendous oirs coming down, and they're going to the lowest place. They're going to Shin Hai, which is Gematria. If you spell out Elokim, then that's Gematria Shin. And then the oisius elikim are another 5 oisius is high. So you're taking that to the highest or down to the lowest place. And that's basically the main kavunas. And then the third brucha he brings down again then when you make the third bracha the first night, the what's it called, the shechiyuni, then over there you're mechaven the lowest zivik, which is the zivik of the chassidus. So all of this comes down every single night that we light ner Chanukah. That's like very bekitzer, I know, because we're sort of running out of time. But basically, the idea is, and I want to add one more point, right? So basically, the idea, in summary, the idea is they're bringing down ore from the highest place to the lowest level. There's a zivig occurring that's miraculous. In other words, we're doing something that we can never really do in the weekdays. Nick is down in a very low place, and we can't really be send down ore there. And Chanukah, we have this special koyach we can send down even to such a low place, right? And that's basically the side of Chanukah. That's ner, right? Which ner is these three zivigim, and that's the three bruchas of lighting the Chanukah menorah. We're mechaven the yidgum mizrachim, because that's the idea of that we're recognizing that or comes from the highest place, which is also what we say in She'usu, with the shin ayin nahoir, and these oiras that are coming from arich, but really even from higher, are coming down into Elikim, into Nick, right? And that's the idea of that the 8 nights of Hanukkah are connected with Yilubas, right? They bring this or down to this lowest place. The idea of Hoyd is the idea of being Moida that Hashem's in that lowest place. And the truth is that, like somebody chatted in the chat, that Hoyd is also to praise. Hoydua means to praise, right? The idea to be able to praise Hashem is not just to be able to praise Hashem when things are going good. Because when things are going good, it's not impressive, right? Obviously, things are going good. Baruch Hashem, right? The idea of being able to praise Hashem even in the darkness, and even when a person's in a difficult situation, and to be able to find that or there, I am a kohen kavoid. I find that or even in the darkness and even the lowest place, right? That is real haidua. That's real praise, to be able to praise Hashem even from that lowest place. Right, and then so someone also chatted the idea of the yaboik, which we saw. There's a Kamun the Rizal presents there. He doesn't really explain about this idea of that in your mechav in the first brucha that you have this gematria of yaboik, right? Is that this yaboik is sort of like discussed as in the Zohar, describes as a place where it's sort of like a crossroad between the physical and the spiritual. It's Havaya with Elokim. Elokim is Teva, Elokim is nature, Elokim is Olam Agashmi. Then Havaya is that Or Arachni, that Or of Hashem, Kivyuchel, that manifests even in that lowest place, right? And so then that would be like the idea of seeing Elikus in everything and seeing Elikus everywhere, in all places. We've actually mentioned this before. This idea that the way that the Leshem explains Havaya, right, is Havaya means existence, means awareness, means that which exists, right? Whichever philosopher it was that said this whole thing, that I think, therefore I am, it's a mistake. There is no I think, there's just I am. Because all of us have everything that's coming in through all of our five senses, right? We have what we see, what we hear, what we see. And then even if a person puts himself in a sunset deprivation tank, a float where he doesn't hear, see, or anything, there's still the thoughts going on in the head, right? The thoughts are a lower gilly, right? But then there's the Havaya. The Havaya is where everyone's the same, because in the person's thoughts, everyone's thoughts are different. One person, based on his childhood and his upbringing and his memories and so on and so forth. So one person's like this, another person's like that. But ultimately, behind all of that is just being, just existence, just awareness, right? Which is beyond thought. And that is where everybody intersects and everyone's the same, because that's the same Or. That's the Or Havaya, right? So the Or Havaya is here in whatever situation we're in, whether that situation that we're in is a situation that's moedik and openly moedik, or whether we're in a matzav that's a difficult matzav, right? So someone chatted the idea of haidua is also this idea of this recognition of ayin, right? That I don't have anything of my own. It's all the Or Hashem, right? And everything that I have is the Or Hashem, and everything is what Hashem gave me, right? So this whole thing, I think, therefore I am, right? I think is Chachma, and I am is pure existence without the thinking. That's the idea of Keser. That's the higher level. That's what someone just chatted. Very good, beautiful. So in a nutshell, that's basically Chanukah. Okay, so I hope that was of. I hope everyone could gain something from it, because I see it's a relatively mixed crowd. Some people come to our more advanced shirim, some people come to a more simple shirim. I hope everyone was able to gain at least something. And for those that understood a little bit of what I showed in the PDF, right, in the file, I'm going to send the file, Bez Hashem. And you know what? Like I always say about the kavunas, because eventually, Bez Hashem, once we finish Oitzos Chaim, I plan to give a shir in the kavunas where Bez Hashem are going to sort of go through them and start learning them. Over here, it was just like I just blasted you with it, or like like just out of nowhere, right? But in kavunas, the way it works is everyone lefi erech, literally. It's so precious if a person is able to daven just with Perish Amilis and to have in mind the words that he's saying. That's so precious to Hashem. That's more than a lot of people do, and that's incredible, right? Then when a person can take one kavuna, two kavunas, whatever it is, right? You don't have to be mechavan the entire kavunas of the Rishash all at one time. My Rebbe Ephraim Goldstein, there was a tekifa where he stopped davening the Siddur Rishash because he felt it was too overwhelming, right? So I'll send out the PDF and take one thing, two things. Doesn't matter. You don't have to do everything. We didn't even talk about everything because there was too much over there to go through within our time frame, right? But just a little bit, just whatever you can do, and of course the Lefim Tzara Agar, the more koich you put in, right? More energy input is more energy output, right? So however much orya and how much kavuna, however much feeling and hergesh you can put into to letting the Chanukah menorah is la'ila. It's a tremendous thing, and everyone's tremendous, and all of you are tremendous, and everyone lefi their erech and lefi what they can do. All right, so everyone, I'm gonna actually send out an email to ask people what their schedule is on Chanukah, because I want to see if Chanukah itself. I myself, I think most nights could probably give a shir at 10. That's probably after we're done lighting and the Sida and everything, especially since the results has to light early, right? So, but if people have Hanukkah parties or whatever, people are going to miss the shirim, then I don't want to interfere. So I'm going to send out an email and then once I get a response, I'm going to send out an email letting people know whether the shirim are going to continue regularly Hanukkah or whether we'll just take a break after Hanukkah or whatever it is. All right. So everyone, have a wonderful, wonderful Hanukkah, wonderful Yom Tov, and we should be zoicha to see the light in the darkness and to recognize the Or Hashem everywhere where we are, right? And at the same time, raise ourselves up and connect to Hashem, and keep growing in our way to Hashem, everybody. All right, I get to vach everyone.
I get to thank you.
My pleasure. Kol tov, everyone.